Well, I'm Mike DeBord, a California collector of art and also more recently a preservationist. And when I say preservationist, I don't mean just collecting art. What I look at in broader context, it includes the exploration and discovery of information related to the artist's life. And that's what I'd like to try to do today. And keep a little place in history and art history for some of these very special artists. And you can find more about this effort on our website, which is artistalmanac.com. I'm honored today to be talking to and talking with Bob Simon, Southern California artist. This discussion is part of a series focused on preserving the legacy of outstanding artists, starting with a small group of artists who were the last students of the renowned Russian-American master Nikolai Feshin, who unexpectedly died in 1955 at age 74. Joseph Nordman had the distinction of being the last student of Nikolai Feshin, and Joseph and two other students, Albert Launderville and Hal Reed, out of the class of 9, were strongly influenced by Nikolai Feshin. All three of these artists went on to become professional artists in their own rights and lifelong friends. Today's focus will primarily be on Joseph Nordman, who was a chemistry professor at the Los Angeles Valley Community College. He was also an assistant to the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams. He was an author, and he was an accomplished artist. Bob, if you would, take us back to when you first met Joseph and how it was that you and Joseph became such good friends over the last 60 years or longer.
Well, as you might know, Mike, it's a long time ago. In 1954, I returned from service in the Army. And returning home, my brother was a student at Valley College, a chemistry student. And he and Joe became familiar and good friends. My brother was rather an outstanding student there in chemistry. In one incident, I remember that Joe created a class for him so he could qualify to continue on to go to UCLA. Oh. So he was the only member of the class. And Joe came to the house and met with my brother and my family. And when I came home, they were already engaged at that level. And I met Joe and learned that he was also interested in drawing and painting. I had an interest in it always and not very good at it and been away from everything anyhow for a long time. And my primary interest was in music, piano and such. My family was that way. My father was a professional musician. So Joe and I met and started talking about painting. We bought, I think they're Walter Foster books.
Yeah.
Sat in the backyard and copied Walter Foster pictures, and then decided we could do better, and we started setting up our own still lifes. Eventually we started painting outdoors. And that continued for a long time. And in that period, I know that Joe was able to join Feshin's art class.
Was that in 54 or perhaps in 55?
It was 55 by now, I think. We've been doing this for quite a while. And he was always intently interested in artists and their artwork. In fact, I know that when Joe was a child, he took drawing lessons. His family provided that for him, and he was pretty good from the onset of it. He did rather good cartooning as well, you may not know. But Joe and I met that way and continued with our work painting. So he was instructive and encouraging and brought me along quite a distance. Later on, there were other adventures in that world with him, so that's another chapter. I think Joe finally decided he was going to move, and he did so. He moved up to Carmel, Monterey.
Yeah.
And I helped him with that move.
I think that was about 1982, if I remember.
There was an interim period there where Joe was doing other things. I know he went to the Virgin Islands for some period of time for interest he had there. He swam with the seals and he painted there and he tended bar, did all kinds of different things.
I saw pictures of him with the Navy SEALs.
That's right. He was quite enamored with that idea. And it was a little bit dangerous, and I think he liked that idea. And came back and he brought back paintings that he did of that area.
Wow.
So he was always engaged in that. He had a wonderful little house he built up on Java Drive off of Mulholland overlooking the valley,
I didn't
and
know that.
lived there for a few years, and then sold that property, moved into an apartment in Sherman Oaks. I think it was on Sunny Slope. It was just north of Ventura Boulevard. And from that point, he decided he wanted to move up to Monterey.
And I think there's one of his friends, Ed Norton Ward,
Ed Ward, yes.
lived in Pacific Grove and found a house across the street from his house that was coming up for rent.
Yes.
And that must have been when Joe moved up there. And you helped him move, didn't you?
Yes, we loaded up all his furniture and rented a truck, and my oldest son and my wife and I got a caravan up there, moved all the furniture, moved it all in the house. It was quite an adventure. It was a lot of fun.
He had a network of friends up there, artist friends and mentors and people he liked to go into workshops with and so
Yes.
forth. Did you join in on those workshops that he attended?
I had occasion to do a few of those, yes.
Can you describe a couple of those just so that we get a feel for that?
Well, let's see.
Like the Virginia City ones as an
Well,
example.
Virginia City was the most intense and most interesting kinds of workshops. We did some in Monterey and Carmel, but they were just one shot, do it with one artist and then find out what he would advise and then move on. But then we met up with Van Waldron,
Yeah.
who is a wonderful artist, really terrific painter. And he had classes every year in Virginia City. And it was an art community that was held in the old St. Mary's Hospital there in Virginia City.
Okay.
And we billeted there, and we had the hallways, we had refrigerators, they had a few bathrooms, we had little rooms that were for each of us, individual rooms. And the day was, we get up early in the morning, and we'd eat whatever kind of breakfast we could. And then we'd all go out to an appointed area that Van would meet us, and we'd all drive our cars out there or go together. And we paint all day. We usually take a lunch with us, pack a lunch of some kind. And then the afternoon we'd get done, we were all kind of tired, get back and we'd put all the paintings on the front porch that we painted that day. And then we'd all have mix ourselves a drink and sit around and criticize each other's pictures. And
In
everybody,
a fun way, I presume.
yeah, everybody took it in good spirit. And part of the routine, there was kind of a KP duty. You'd pull one night a week, you'd have to prepare dinner for everybody else. So Joe and I would team up and we'd do dinner for the whole crowd. And then we'd, after dinner, we'd go up to the studio upstairs and paint still lifes. And Van would march around the room and give us instructions and do demonstrations and really would bring us along. It was very intense, but I think I learned more there than I did on any other occasion. I never learned very much of it in school, per se, college or otherwise, where I took a lot of electives. But that was a really great experience with that up there. That lasted for 10 years.
And Van's florals seem to be over the top.
Oh, yes. He was,
That's what he's most known for, I believe, is
yes,
his floral
he was a
paintings.
master of florals and painted so rapidly. It was, to watch him do a demonstration, you could just barely keep up with what he was trying to get across. But he painted very rapidly and he was very free with his paintings. But he would give you one-on-one time and give you really good direction. I remember painting this picture here in this studio up there.
Oh, wow.
That was done up in Virginia City as a studio painting. We had a setup, and it was one of the first large florals I really tried. I did smaller ones, but that was one of the early ones I did.
Wow, that's an impressive painting. But that's some of the other artists that you saw in those workshops. Were they the same folks, same artists,
Yes.
year after year that would go up to Virginia City?
Yes, they were, each time.
And who were some of the other ones? Did you meet Charles Movalli?
I met Charles Movalli. He didn't go to Virginia City.
No, he didn't. He just did
No.
the area
He
in the Monterey
he
area.
did workshops and he would do demonstrations in Monterey. And Charles was he was our absolute idol as far as the landscape painting and what have you. I don't know if you ever could see him paint, but he was very waspish. He would get in front of the picture and he was just hurried and up and down and very, very rapid. And the amazing thing about his painting, you'd watch him go through it and you were sitting there for maybe 10, 15 minutes and there wasn't very much there. He just put this all over the canvas. And then he would say, look at his watch and say, well, we better finish this up because we're running out of time. And I think to myself, finish what? You know? And magically, in a few minutes, he'd finish this thing and it was absolutely complete.
In Joseph's collection, which I ended up getting, you know, after he passed away,
Yes.
are videotapes. And they're on the old VHS videos.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And one of those was of Charles Mavalli giving lessons
Yes.
in the Monterey area. And there's 3 sets of lessons that he gave.
Right.
And because he's Italian and he talks with his hands and he is very entertaining, I
Very.
got captured with those videos and I watched and I saw exactly what you're talking about, of how he put the paint on and you're looking to try to figure out what the end product's going to be.
I know it.
And he would joke the whole time, which made it very entertaining to watch
Very,
and
very
to
so,
see.
yeah.
But the talent that he had, I'd watch him paint a picket fence and he'd do like 3 pickets and he'd go, well, you all know what the rest of these look like. You don't need to see every one.
That's right.
You can see the idea of it. And then he would get to that end point and I watched how he applied that paint and it all
Right.
came into play. You know, it must have been really fascinating to see that. But they did a museum exhibition for Charles Mavalli back east. And then they did another exhibition at the large gallery.
Yes.
The videotape that I had, I was so impressed with it. I sent it back to his wife, Dale, and it was included in those exhibitions. They called it Movie Night.
Right.
And so everybody got to see Charles Mavalli
Yeah, he was
giving the instructions. And it was just a wonderful experience.
He had so many anecdotes too. And one of his favorite topics was a painting of a dog. And he said, well, this dog, if you look at it, this dog only has 3 legs, but you never notice it in the painting. And I think he was the first one to tell us. I think it was an expression that comes out of the art world. It says, first you paint the dog, then you paint the fleas. So it's an idea of going slowly and then putting the picture
put that
together.
detail in.
Yeah, but that was one of his great examples.
Did you meet Ted Gershner?
No, I didn't meet Ted
Yeah,
Gershner.
he was in that Pacific Grove area. I didn't know who.
That's
See, that's
right.
why I was curious at who all attended. Ed Wharton Nord must have attended.
Ed would be there, yes.
At the Virginia City workshops. Yeah.
Joe had, I think, a really very nice landscape that Ted Gershner did, that he had in his house for a long time. Very nice painting, and he was very, very good colorist. He handled color just beautifully. His compositions were quite nice too.
Did you get a chance to go up and visit Joe in his house very often?
Did I?
Yeah.
I went up
Over
there.
the years.
Oh yes, very frequently. My wife and I would go together, and then I was participating in a gallery there. So at least once a month I had to go up and reload the gallery because it was like renting wall space. I could put in maybe four pictures, maybe 5, and they wouldn't last too long. So I have other pictures I painted and replaced them. We would stay with Joe. Joe came down here quite frequently, and that was kind of how the relationship worked out for that distance. I would say I was up there at least twice a month over the years, pretty much.
When you knew Joe in the early on time, when he was taking classes under Feshin, did he talk about those classes much?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
Well, he adored Feshin. He really understood him because he say inscrutable. Feshin, of course, had a language barrier, and he was quite demanding in his own way. And he went to he was watching one of his students looking at his painting in a mirror. And Feshin asked him why he was doing that. And he said, I wanted to see how the composition looked if I looked at the composition backwards. So Feshin went to his office and came back with a magnifying glass. He says, now look at your picture with the magnifying glass. He says, maybe you want to paint it differently in this spot or this spot. So it was just to emphasize that he didn't believe in using artificial means to get to the end. So
It seemed that Feshen and Joseph had such a relationship, especially towards the end,
Yes.
as Joe describes in an article he wrote later. And he must have got pretty close to him, because it seemed like Feshen had a little bit stiff style, and they say the Russian language barrier was there. But it seemed like that all broke down towards the end, and Joe and Nikolai got a chance to really become friends towards the end.
Well, Joe invited him to his home, and I think he took him to his laboratory. Joe had a laboratory in Van Nuys for water analysis and other smaller contracts that he did. And Feshen was just intrigued with how he managed all this chemistry. And one of the things that came out of that was that Feshen loved to paint on very, very dry surface. He would put his oil paints out on newspaper so that the newspaper would absorb some of the oil out of the paint so it would dry it up. He'd do a lot of overpainting and dry brushing. So Joe decided he would concoct a material for him to cover like a gesso, which he did, which Feshen just thought was spectacular that he could do this, and determined from what he wanted how to make the mixture and do that. Well, as it occurred later on, it was always said that you have to be careful with Feshen's paintings because they are so dry, and that you have to protect them because they'll flake off. I mean, there's a very beautiful painting of a woman in the San Diego Museum that I think they put under glass now because it did dry out some. But they got along that way, and I knew that they were friends, and Joe had him to his place up on Java Drive, and he had him to his chemistry building over in Van Nuys.
What was Joe's reaction when Feshen unexpectedly died?
He was really kind of dumbstruck, thunderstruck, I would say, that he died, extremely crestfallen, because he had searched out somebody who he felt was really a master of the arts that he could study with and learn something. And he was really working, going there, taking his lessons currently. And I think he was even planning to go up and take some color photos of his paintings. He took some, but he wasn't satisfied. And then he learned, I think he read it in the paper, that he died.
Such a shock. And he had just taken those photos. He'd asked permission of Nikolai Feshen if he could take pictures of his class, which he allowed him to do.
Yes.
But he also took pictures of his art. And from what I've read, Nikolai Feshen was pretty excited about taking all that art, taking it out of the studio and putting it outside for Joseph to photograph.
Right.
And Joseph photographed all of this wonderful art. And then when he developed the film, he saw that he wished he'd had a different camera,
Yes.
had done something different. And he wasn't sure how he was going to tell Nikolai that he wanted to do it over again with a different camera.
Right.
And before he could do that, that's
He
when
died.
he died.
Yeah,
And it was it had to have been quite a shock because there was no indication that he was.
No, there
he
wasn't.
died in his sleep, and it caught everybody off guard. All
That's
the
right.
students were in shock, and they tried to continue the classes even after he died, but that didn't last very long.
Yeah.
Out of that class of 9, 3 of those students, Albert Launderville and Hal Reed and Joseph, continued that friendship that started in the class, and that was what kept them together.
Sure.
And all of them seemed to be heavily influenced by the Feshen experience, but they all went a little different direction in how they applied it to their art.
Well, Max Turner was in that same league in terms of his admiration for Feshen. And when you visit Max's home, you'll see in his paintings that influence.
Yeah.
You see it in his drawings. But Max Turner probably is, from my opinion, the most gifted sculptor that we have around. And also, he's not lacking at all in his ability to paint portraiture and still lifes. But I just really admire him. I think he's really one of the best talents I've ever seen.
It's interesting too because in your case, you can paint and you've moved into sculpting along the way.
Mm-hmm.
How does that transition? It works for Max. Please, if you talk to Max, he refers to himself as a sculptor first,
Right.
and a painter second. But in your experience in painting and so forth, how did you ever move into that sculpting side of art?
Well, I gave my kids a big bag of water-based clay one day, and they were out in the backyard making stuff. And I thought, I don't know if I could make anything with this, and I made a likeness of Chopin, my favorite composer. It wasn't bad, it didn't look like him, but it had a round head and all.
Yeah.
And I got interested in it, and that I took off from there, and I kind of became self-educated in terms of how to form it, how to sculpt it, how to mold it, and how to make a finished product. So I did a lot of, you might say, portraiture of a kind. These figures that I have in the house, I've got like Brahms and Monteverdi and Chopin and Mark Twain and Chief Gull and subjects I was interested in. And then I think anybody that sculpts wants to do bigger things. I had a large piece in the backyard. It was about 12 feet high. It was a Japanese figure I did. I knew some Japanese friends. And it came down in the earthquake and broke to pieces. But then I have those large figures in the yard that I had. But I kind of went into it by myself. I didn't know a sculptor, didn't know anybody who did it, until I later met Ernie Shelton, who was a very good sculptor and worked for the Disney Studios sculpting. And he's the one that was influential in coming about the Maltese Falcon.
And we're going to get to that next. I think that'll be a really good story. One of the most interesting stories I've come across in researching the life of Joseph Nordman relates to the Maltese Falcon. Bob, this is your story, so please give us the background on this special falcon statue.
Well, I'll try as best I can. See, Joe was an avid reader of mysteries. He liked Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler. And of course, the Maltese Falcon comes from the stories. And my brother also thought the Maltese Falcon was just a wonderful thing. He'd always wanted a Maltese Falcon. And there were some around that were pretty ugly. They didn't look like it, but he saw that, and I said, well, and Ernie Shelton at the time was living at my brother's house. They were living together.
Living with Leon?
Yes.
Okay.
Ernie was a sculptor for Disney Studios, and by the way, he once held the world's record in the high jump when he went to SC. So anyhow, Ernie was quite a character and really a very, very nice person. And he knew that my brother always wanted a Maltese Falcon. I don't know why he wanted it, but that's what he wanted. So as it happened, Ernie was house sitting for a friend who worked for the studios. And he sat at the house for almost 2 weeks while he was on vacation because he had dogs in the yard and he would take care of all that. So when he returned, he offered to pay Ernie for his time. Ernie says, we're friends, you don't have to pay me anything. He said, well, what could I do? What could I do? So Ernie said, I'd like that Maltese Falcon you have. And he had one in the house. It was like a Bakelite finish. It was heavy. And I remember the flashing under the chin of the bird, under the beak and under the chin, and how shiny the finish was. So what he did, he wrapped it up in newspaper, shredded newspaper, put string around it, and brought it to my brother's house. Brought it home, and my brother's in the living room, the dining room, sitting at the table as he always did. And he said, what is that? Ernie says, he hands it to me, he says, this is what dreams are made of. He really did. I mean, that was right out of the movie.
Yeah.
So my brother opened this thing, and he was really enamored with it. And of course, as we mentioned earlier in our conversation, he went to Eddie Brandt's store where he would rent video cassettes, VHS cassettes. And Eddie Brandt had an enormous library of mystery stories and movies that involved stories of Hammett and so on, and other stories of the film noir style.
Okay.
And my brother thought, well, this would be a great place to sell these falcons. So he came to me and he said, why don't you figure out how much this falcon is worth? He says, I think I could sell this at Eddie Brandt's. I said, well, don't do that. I will make you a mold of that, and we'll make copies of it. We'll make it and it'll look just like that. So he thought, well, that's a good idea. So I took the bird, Leon's bird, which they called it at the time, and I made a mold of it. And I still have the mold, and these figures in front of us come from that mold. And I went to him and I said, well, now I returned the original to him, and I was starting to produce these, and I took one to him and I said, now where's the original? He says, Eddie Brandt sold it. And I said, he didn't sell it really? He says, yeah. He said, well, who did he sell it to? He said, I don't know. He said, got $100 for it.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, that's a little unsettling because that was, I think, kind of an original piece. It came from the studio. So it bothered me a great deal that happened because I didn't attach any real value to it. I thought, well, it's a studio prop. And I knew there were other props. I learned that, I had a suspicion that wouldn't have been the only one. There had to be others. Excuse me. So I made the Falcon, and it turned out really nice. It was really a super copy. And showed it to Joe Nordman, and he said, oh, he said, I'd love to have one of those. You know, Dashiell Hammett was his guy, and Raymond Chandler and so on. So I made one for Joe. And Joe called me later, he said, could you get me another Falcon? He said, I have a friend I'd like to get a Falcon for. I said, sure. So I made it for him. He gave it to his barber up there.
That's Gene Allen. Gene's barber shop.
Gene's barber shop up
Lighthouse.
At Lighthouse, right.
Yeah.
That's where that Falcon went. Then I had other people who were taken with the idea of having a Falcon. So I'd make another Falcon and give them another Falcon. And then I think one went to the couple in Carmel that had that story we were just talking about, Ray and Ramsey.
And Francis Ramsey, yeah.
He got one.
Okay.
And I understood later he had that converted into a bronze. As we were talking about where these went and who has them, I don't really know exactly the number that were reproduced. There wasn't that many. And the people that Joe was in touch with that liked them, he would have me make one for them. And I'd do that, and give it to Joe. And then I have a niece that had a bookstore and had all kinds of people in there that liked mystery books, and I gave her one, so she would have one. Then, of course, I kept one for myself to remember it. I don't know if this is a perfect connection, but I read an article some years later that one of these props had sold for $97,000. I think that was the number, and I have a suspicion that it was the one that went through Brandt's store. I think that might have happened. So here they are. They're made of hydrostone, colored, and they have a soft bottom. As you might see, this is a cork. I put that there so if you set it down irregularly, it might chip the piece off the base. It would be hard to do because it's pretty heavy stuff and it's very durable. So if you have anybody that needs a Falcon, you have to call me direct.
I see in the pictures here in this photo album, there's a picture of Ernie Shelton,
yes,
who you're describing as the person who got it from that house. And he's painting one of these Falcons, and it shows on the little caption for the photo of April 1998. Do you recognize that picture? Does that relate to anything that you remember?
Well, I do know, Mike, that's taken in my back porch.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Okay.
These are the cupboard doors. This is my easel here. And this is one of the birds that came out of the mold. And Ernie's painting it. I don't know why he would do that because I sprayed them. I did them in base. I put in a primer and then I sprayed them lightly so that they'd be permanent. And then to finish them, you would, to keep them nice, you could just put a wax. I like black shoe polish. Works fine.
And just buff it out then.
Just put even just straight wax would be fine on there. Just you want it to be. I don't know what's to preserve, but if it ever broke or it fell, they're easy to repair.
Are they?
Very, yes.
Wow.
Those hygroscopic materials go back together. Plaster of Paris, hydrostone, white art, and all that
But
stuff.
this is a pretty, hydrostone's a really durable product.
Very dense and very durable.
Initially, the first one was a brown Bakelite. Is that what you said the first
Black.
one?
Black, really
Bakelite.
black Bakelite. Yeah.
Okay. And so that was, the color was actually in the,
It was in the bird. It was
In the
it was a
bird.
black piece, yes.
okay.
Because I remember watching in the motion picture, that piece was not done in Bakelite, because you had a knife and they were cutting at the surface of it.
Right.
You could never do that with Bakelite,
Okay.
but it had some other material for that piece. And also, as we mentioned, the person who was directing the movie thought that the bird that was originally sculpted like this was too crisp and didn't look old enough. So he had the one for the movie aged. And I think they just rubbed it down and took off some of the detail and softened the edges on it to make it look worn. So that would be the difference between the two.
It's a very special bird.
Yeah, really. It's just
And
a
you
lot of
still
fun.
have the mold.
I still have it.
And inside that mold is what you called a blank?
As a blank. It's just more hydrostone, another piece inside to keep the mold
From deteriorating.
for shrinking or
Oh,
changing.
shrinking, okay.
And the thing is, God, I think I've had that mold for all those years and it still works. That's what's so surprising.
Wow.
I'm just lucky, I guess, when it worked out that way.
I know Joseph, once he got the bird from you,
Yeah.
and he gave some to his friends. And he gave one to Jerry Byrne, and that's one that's sitting right here that I got from Jerry.
Right.
And he was very protective once he got this, because he really had an eye for differences in what people were saying was a Maltese Falcon versus the ones that had
Right.
come directly through your process.
I know.
And so he kept sending little notes to Jerry after he gave it to him, saying, now you have the replica from the real one, and these other ones that you're reading about, you can see that they're not real, you know. And he was doing a comparison all the time. Even in his photo album, he has a front and back picture of the one that he had from you,
Mhm.
and he's got another one of exact same size,
Yeah.
front and back, that he wrote the word fake
It is.
next to. So he had an eye for and a concern for what was real and what wasn't real.
Yeah, and you can tell from the view of the back, the detail is different. The shoulders are broader. There's more distance in some of between the wing and the feather coming down off the head. And you notice the eye isn't quite the same either. I just wonder how they did that. It looks like somebody, and then take a look at the claws, to the talons. They're not quite as nicely done.
Now you can see how detailed they are
Yeah.
here, and you've lost all
There's
of
a lot
that
of
in
loss
these
in it.
other ones.
Yeah, that's very obviously not a real one. No. So, yeah, that's the story on these replicas. So I don't know whether they're going to come and arrest me someday and drive up in in a car and say,
That was a concern I think Joe had somewhere along the way, at least he passed along, was he loved them, but he because he didn't know all the full history from the day one all the way through. He was very careful with them, but he wanted to give them to his friends. Those were the people that got those birds, were people that he
was
really
close to, Well, the
really
funny
counted
thing,
on as close friends.
he said to me one day, he says, you ought to sell these. You can make them and sell them. I said, Joe, we talked about that, and we both finally agreed. It's not a good idea to sell these things because I don't want to turn it into a commerce. It's just something that's nice to do for people.
And I think the people that have them feel very special that they do have these.
Yeah.
I know I do. I've got it mounted on top of a mirror, so you can really see it. And it's one that everybody comments on.
Well, my nieces and nephews, of course, are from a different generation, and they don't know this bird from a jar of Vicks. They don't know about the falcon, what it is or what it means.
Yeah.
So when I gave it to my niece, she said, well, what is this? And I had to explain the whole story about how the bird's in the motion picture and why she should have that in her store.
It goes all the way back to 1941, so we're losing track of that.
Sure.
Of those things that we all thought were so special and won Academy Awards.
That's
and
right.
everything. So that was a pretty impressive movie. And I think it was Humphrey Bogart's. That was really the movie that set him
That's right.
as an actor. You know, that was
So if you ever have a phone call from me and I'm at the at Warner Brothers, who was Archeo, and they want me to sign a release on all these birds or do something, I'll call you.
okay. That'll be good. Anyway, it's been a story I've always wanted to capture, and
Okay.
and also the people that have them. It's nice to share the information back with them,
Sure.
because sometimes the story gets passed around, but you're the person that had the whole story. You're the person. This is Bob Simon's story, because he was
Story
there.
of the film.
He's got the mold, and the mold on the side of it says
Yeah.
Leon's bird, right?
Sure.
And that's what it still says on your original mold from that.
Well, I use the same method making these as I did with the sculptures I do. That little picture of the figure of Brahms up there, and that Mark Twain and all that stuff is done the same way I made these.
Yeah, I love that, Mark Twain too. I think that's your best piece. I just love that.
Oh, I'm glad you
That
like
sculpture that you did. When you're sculpting, I just have a question to ask. When you're sculpting, because I'm not a sculptor,
that. Right.
are you really envisioning something and you're taking things away, or are you adding things on? How do you envision the end product when you're actually doing the sculpting?
Well, because I'm kind of amateurish and not really very good at this, but Max Turner could tell you that better. But for me, working in wet clay gives me the opportunity to add and detract, put on and take off.
Okay.
And I keep manipulating it until I get the feel of it that represents the subject I'm doing. So it's like I don't think I could ever carve in marble. I think that would be beyond my.
Taking things just one way,
You
can't
go
back.
one direction.
Is it okay if Jason brings that over for
Oh,
just
sure.
a minute? And I just love this picture. I'm going to turn this around.
Well,
slightly.
what's his name? Dean has one.
Yeah, Dean Chapman was, his whole thing, he had a books collection that was off the charts, and Mark Twain is one of his favorites.
Is that right?
Yes, and before he had the art gallery, he was a book collector.
When he called me about this piece after Joe passed away, I said that he wanted to know what I wanted to do with it. And I said, well, I have one myself. I said, you have a gallery there. If you want to sell that through your gallery, you might, or if you're interested for yourself, let me know. So I didn't know what his answer was, but I guess he decided to keep it.
He told me that he just fell in love with it,
Oh.
And I think that it captures you in the same way. As I look at it, I think it's like, say, it's an incredible piece. Is this the only one you have now?
Yes.
Okay. But I think you did a great job on it. You could cast another one of these then, couldn't you,
Absolutely.
from this one.
Sure.
But that's very special. And we looked out in your yard earlier and saw your large sculptures, and
Right.
that's a real talent. That's a real talent. I was impressed.
Well, thank you.
And I've got one of your paintings, which is one of the special paintings. We have it right by the front door, so we can see it all the time. And it has a view down towards Monterey Bay off of a road, and
Yeah.
it reminds me of when you were visiting with Joseph, and painting with him and
That's
so
right.
forth. And it kind of ties it all together, since we've got.
It's funny, but all the paintings that you do, and that some are sold and some you give away, the ones you remember the best are the ones you'd like to get back and destroy.
I'm destroying. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah. I've gone to a friend's house and see a painting on the wall, and I have to ask myself whether I painted it or not. A lot of times it's been so long ago that I've done them.
I painted a painting my sister has on her wall, and every time I'm there I want to take it down and redo it, make it better, because it was when I first started painting. But I have that same feeling, I go over there and I look at it and I think, wow, can I pull that down for a little bit and just work? And she says, no, I like it the way it is, so
Yeah.
you can't change things. It captures a moment of time. So you started sculpting really because of your interest in some of these people that you sculpted.
Yes,
because of the music, your
The music
background, and so
all the
forth.
pieces I did originally were all musicians.
Wow.
I think the first one I did was Chopin, and then I tried others. And the Monteverdi was interesting. There was a company in New York manufacturing hi-fi equipment. Back at the time we had stereo hi-fi. And they had distribution of their product, which is called Monteverdi. And it was a Mediterranean-style furniture. And the person who was one of their representatives on the West Coast knew me and knew that I could sculpt, and he said, "Would you do a Monteverdi figure for me?" I said, "Sure." So I did Monteverdi. They ordered 500 of them.
Oh my God, you're kidding.
That thing was reproduced downtown, yeah.
Oh my God, 500.
The guy downtown's name was Ad Hirsch on Santa Fe, and he did all kinds of sculpted products they'd paint and fix. So the Monteverdi was my most successful piece.
Wow, that's pretty good. Well,
Yeah.
500, that's a lot of...
And they shipped them all over the country and
statues,
all over
yeah.
the place. So they went to the dealers along with the merchandise.
Well, I think the Maltese Falcon landed in good hands with you because
Yeah.
it's been a number of years and you still got the mold and you know the history and it makes that special.
Yeah.
But I sure like this guy. This is
I'm glad you
This
like
is one
that
that I saw in pictures, and I saw the one at Dean's. He showed me the one at Dean Chapman at
Yeah.
his gallery because I asked specifically to see
Well, that's
it.
the one that Joe had, and he liked it.
And that's pretty special. Alrighty, is there anything else you want to say as we close up?
I can't think of anything special. I think you'll have a really nice visit with Max tomorrow.
I'm really looking forward to that. I was looking for him for over a year, and
Yeah.
he called me, and I was thrilled when he did.
Yeah.
And it's been great to meet you in person. You and I have been talking over
On
the
the phone.
phone, and we've sent things back and forth. And I really want to thank you for providing to me those first 4 photo albums of Joe's life from the day he was
Yeah.
born basically up through his college days. And it added to the set that I already had, that he was so meticulous about documenting everything in his
Yeah.
life. And I've now got the full set. It's a way to capture a piece of history for an
Well,
artist as Joe was, you know.
Sure. Well, I'm flattered that you'd want to interview me for this, and I appreciate your doing so. I think preserving it is really a wonderful thing to do.
Well, that's what we're here to do.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
It's good to see you.
Same.